5 Forgotten and Intriguing Punishments from History. History has had something reasonable of deadbeats, from cheats to professional killers. Some notable techniques for discipline have been concocted to dispense equity to these lowlifes. However, there are a few types of equity that seldom, if at any point, were uncovered to people in general. Number 1 Kang. In China, the Kang strategy for discipline was first referenced around the 17th century. Kang came in a few structures, however they all mutual a similar general thought. The guilty party was put in a wooden edge that secured his neck set up. Just his head showed up on the opposite side. The huge casing kept the wrongdoer from putting his hands to his mouth. Incapable to take care of himself, he was left to the benevolence of others in his locale to take care of him and help him with everyday assignments. A few variations of the Kang comprised uniquely of the neck collar, which permitted the casualty to move while wearing the gadget. The heaviness of the Kang was modified to coordinate the wrongdoing. Some Kang were accounted for to weigh around 90 kilograms, 200 pounds, regularly making the criminal kick the bucket from the pressure. Another variation had a confine worked around it, which kept the guilty party still. These Kang were frequently positioned in broad daylight places. Some convenient Kang could hold more than each criminal in turn. Number 2 Treadmills. The treadmill, a 19th century discipline utilized fundamentally in British penitentiaries, was like the current exercise machine. Be that as it may, the jail treadmill looked more like a water wheel than a moving floor and constrained its client to play out a climbing movement instead of a running one. These treadmills weren't planned as well-being machines. Rather, detainees had to stroll on them for 8 hours out of every day with periodic breaks. The dreariness and arduous work was expected to deflect detainees from perpetrating different violations. Treadmills could likewise be connected to apparatus. In Bedford Prison, the treadmills fueled the creation of flour. As this action brought in cash for the jail, the detainee authoritatively gained his keep. After some time, be that as it may, the linkage to hardware blurred, and the treadmill turned into a straightforward discipline dependent on strolling. Number 3 Pitch capping. Pitch caps were utilized chiefly on individuals associated with being rebels during the 1798 Irish Rebellion. The pitch cap was a cone-shaped cap made from any material close within reach, for example, hardened cloth. Bubbling contribute was poured the cone, and afterward the cap was constrained onto the speculate's head. At the point when the cap was removed, the hair and scalp went with it. A few techniques added explosive to the cap and lit the black powder ablaze after the pitch cooled. In spite of the fact that it was conventional for men to be bareheaded in chapel, it was said that Irish clerics made a special case for overcomers of pitch capping, who were permitted to cover their scarred scalps with a cloth. Number 4 Picket. The picket, otherwise known as piquet/, was frequently utilized for discipline in late archaic Europe, particularly in the military. A stake was constrained into the ground, and the level end was honed to a harsh point. The criminal was suspended over the stake. Records differ with regards to whether the individual being referred to was hanging by his thumb or his wrist. Crooks were suspended at a tallness that permitted them to remain on the stake with a solitary foot. The stake was honed enough to cause distress, however not to penetrate the skin. The detainee should remain on the stake until the torment turned out to be a lot to tolerate. By then, he could pull himself up to soothe the agony. Yet, that arrangement caused torment in his wrist or thumb. The outcome was a pick your toxic substance style of discipline which eventually caused torment over the whole body. Number 5 Field punishment. Number 1. When beating was cancelled in the British Armed Force in 1881, authorities needed to consider better approaches to distribute equity to the individuals who were blameworthy of minor offences, for example, intoxication. One type of control was the abnormally named field punishment number 1, which was utilized until 1920. The guilty party was tied awake for a few hours per day, in some cases to a wheel or post, with a military official checking his stance occasionally. During World War I, nonetheless, field punishment number 1 was something other than mellow mortification. As one record from Private Frank Bastable illustrated, this discipline could be perilous. When on march for rifle assessment, subsequent to opening the jolts and shutting them again the second time, as it sometimes fell short for the official the first occasion when I unintentionally let off a round. I needed to go before the CO and got number 1 filled punishment. I was tied facing a cart by lower legs and wrists for 2 hours per day, 1 hour toward the beginning of the day and 1 in the early evening in winter and under shell fire.